Welcome to an unforgettable journey back in time to 18th century Lisbon, the wealthiest, most magnificent and most influential city on earth before London or Paris ever rose to claim their modern dominance. Imagine stepping into a world where the air was thick with the heady scent of cinnamon, black pepper, cloves and exotic spices from distant lands, where the cobblestone streets literally shimmered under the weight of Brazilian gold and diamonds, and where every corner echoed with the legacy of the Age of Discovery, the bold voyages that connected continents for the first time. Using cutting-edge AI technology, we have breathed new life into faded sketches, intricate copperplate engravings, and masterful oil paintings, turning them into breathtaking photorealistic scenes that feel as real as if you were there. Today, you won't just learn about history. You will walk its streets, breathe its air, and feel the pulse of a city at the height of its glory and on the brink of unimaginable disaster. In the early 1700s, Lisbon was home to nearly 200,000 souls, making it Europe's fourth largest city, outshone only by London, Paris and Naples. It was a place of dizzying contrasts, celebrated as the new Rome with more than 40 majestic churches and 90 sprawling convents dominating the skyline with their domes and bell towers, yet a tangled medieval warren of narrow, winding streets where the riches of a vast empire flowed unchecked. Through neighborhoods that had no modern sewage system, no running water in homes, and frequent outbreaks of disease, wealthy merchants in silk robes brushed past barefoot children, and the clink of gold coins mixed with the cries of street vendors and the tolling of church bells. This glittering golden age was racing toward a terrifying climax. We will see exactly how an entire thriving capital was erased in a single morning, and how through courage and radical vision, it rose from total destruction to become the world's very first modern city of the Enlightenment, a blueprint for rational urban planning that influenced cities everywhere. To understand why the whole of Europe and beyond stood in stunned horror when Lisbon fell, you must first see what it truly was by 1750. The beating heart and central nervous system of the first truly global economy humanity had ever built. Behold the Tagus River, the golden throat of Europe, the vital artery feeding an empire that spanned 4 continents. In the mid-1700s, this was not just a river, it was the single most strategic and profitable harbour in the Atlantic world. A stunning 1730 engraving by Joachim Ottens captures a forest of masts so impossibly dense that travellers swore you could almost walk across the river by leaping from one ship's deck to another. Why did thousands of vessels crowd these waters every day? Because of the 5 pillars of Portuguese supremacy that made Lisbon the throbbing core of global trade. Ships poured in relentlessly, fueling the birth of true worldwide commerce. Pillar 1. Absolute control of the spice link. While rivals scrambled for routes, Portugal already owned the East. Strongholds in Goa, Malacca and Timor sent fleets loaded with pepper, cinnamon, cloves and nutmeg straight to Lisbon's warehouses, where they fetched astronomical prices from a spice-hungry Europe. Pillar 2. The silk and porcelain route through Macau, giving Lisbon near monopoly on white gold, delicate Chinese porcelain that every aristocratic home in Paris, London and Vienna craved as the ultimate status symbol. Pillar 3. The African connection. Key ports in Angola and Mozambique funneled ivory, rare tropical woods and raw gold into the city's coffers. But the mightiest pillar, the 4th, was the Brazilian gold rush. After the 1695 discovery of massive deposits in Minas Gerais, nearly 1,000 tons of gold and millions of diamond carats flooded across the Atlantic in armed convoys. an oceanic torrent of wealth that transformed everything. This unimaginable fortune didn't just fill royal treasuries. It turned Lisbon into a global cultural and scientific beacon. King Juvif poured Brazilian gold into prestige, building the era's most advanced aqueducts, amassing a secret library of nautical charts, the Roteiros, treated like state secrets, containing the world's most guarded ocean navigation data. By 1750, Lisbon stood as the planet's primary warehouse and its wealthiest creditor, lending to other nations and shaping international power. Yet the riverfront was raw contrast, a babel of languages: Dutch, English, Italian, African dialects, mixed with the gritty shouts of Portuguese stevedores unloading cargo. The Ribeira district dazzled with gold and exotic goods, but reeked of sweat and reality. Unlike sheltered inland capitals like Paris or London, Lisbon lived staring straight into the endless blue ocean, forever drawn to the horizon. The Tagus was both life-giver and open sewer. The legendary stench of Lisbon came from waste hurled from windows, cascading down hills into the water. Still, the same river supplied fish to feed the poor and diamonds to crown kings. Today, the Tagus remains Lisbon's soul, though heavy galleons have given way to cruise liners and sailboats. The Ribeira Power Centre is now the Grand Praia do Comércio, a place we'll revisit to see how it rose phoenix like from utter ruin. Picture yourself before the Pau da Ribeira, the royal palace that symbolized Portugal's reach for over 250 years. If Versailles embodied French absolutism, this palace embodied Portuguese global empire. Begun in the early 1500s by Manuel I, endlessly expanded. By the mid-1700s it was a wonder, over 70,000 volumes in the Royal Library, paintings by Titian, Rubens, Correggio and irreplaceable archives of the discoveries, secret maps charting routes to riches. Juvir rivaled Louis Sive in Baroque splendor, using gold to buy papal titles and transform the royal chapel into a glittering masterpiece of gold and silver. But it was more than a residence. It was the empire's administrative brain, with clerks below tracking pepper prices, gold weights and trade from Brazil to Indonesia. Today, not one stone remains. When we reach 1755, you'll see why. The site is now the vast open Praia do Comércio. To understand Lisbon fully, grasp its all-consuming bond with God. The Jernimus Monastery in Belm, already 200 years old, was a Manueline masterpiece. Weaving ropes, coral and ships into stone, funded by the 5% pepper tax on Indian goods. Sailors prayed here before voyages that could last 3 years. Survivors returned to give thanks. Belm Tower, farther out in the river then, was both ceremonial gateway and grim prison, its dungeons flooded with tides, holding forgotten prisoners. Carmo Convent towered over Rossio, the city's premier Gothic church, its library legendary, its spire visible citywide. Catholicism was everywhere, a church or chapel on nearly every corner, bells ringing the hours of prayer and city news. But this piety had a dark shadow that shocked Enlightenment minds in Paris and London. Rossio Square, bustling market and celebration place, yet the stage for the Portuguese Inquisition's auto da fé. Portugal remained fiercely conservative. The Inquisition 1536 on still hunted new Christians, hurted Jews suspected of secret Judaism, heretics, witches, and those accused of sodomy. While French salons debated reason, Lisbon held public burnings, lavish spectacles with the king and nobility attending. Victims paraded in yellow sanbenitos with red crosses before the flames. This created an atmosphere of beauty laced with fear, wealth and art alongside repression, censored books and smuggled ideas. Today Rossio is vibrant joy. The Inquisition headquarters is now the Dona Maria II National Theatre. But in the 1700s, it shaped every day. Climb from riverfront splendor into the hills and enter another reality. Alfama, Lisbon's oldest district, a medieval labyrinth surviving Moorish rule and reconquest. Life spilled into streets. Tiny houses meant cooking, washing, and socializing outside. Varina's fishwives balanced sardine baskets on heads, calling prices in rhythmic musical chants. No running water, public fountains only. Gallegos from Galicia hauled barrels uphill, looked down upon yet indispensable. Opposite hill, Bairro Alto, quiet by day with aristocrats and craftsmen, wild by night, early cradle of fado from sailors' melancholic songs and Portuguese guitar. Nights held danger, crime, chamber pots emptied with cries of guavai. It was All Saints' Day, sacred holiday. Churches overflowed, thousands of candles burning, incense thick. At 9:40 and the ground erupt. Not a tremor, a colossal 8.5 9.0 undersea earthquake lasting nearly 6 minutes. Church roofs caved in, crushing worshippers. Narrow Alfama and Baixa streets became graves as buildings collapsed. Survivors fled to the river, the only open space. Then the water vanished. 40 minutes later, a 20-30-foot tsunami roared up the Tagus, smashing waterfront, drowning crowds, wrecking docks and palace. Still not over. Candles ignited ruins. Fires fused into a 5-day inferno. No water. Blocked streets. Lisbon was crushed, drowned, burned. 30,000, 60,000 dead from 200,000. 85% of buildings destroyed. Ribeira Palace vanished. Royal Library's 70,000 books ash. Discovery Archives lost forever. Titian and Rubens' masterpieces dust. Carmo stands ruined today as memorial. Look up at open sky, see exactly what survivors saw in 1755, a skeleton of the world's richest city. The catastrophe didn't just destroy buildings, it shattered blind faith. Voltaire and Rousseau asked, how could a good God permit this on a holy day in the most devout city? It ended naive religious optimism and helped launch the Enlightenment's full force. King Jos I, Juve's successor, was so terrified he developed a phobia of stone buildings and lived the rest of his life in luxury tents outside the city. Rebuilding fell to Prime Minister Marcos de Pombal. Legend. Bury the dead and feed the living. A true Enlightenment figure, he saw destruction as opportunity. He cleared rubble, ignored old church and noble land claims, designed the rational Baixa Pombalina grid, pioneered quake-resistant buildings, the Gaiola Pombalina, flexible wooden cage frames that sway but don't break, tested by soldiers marching around models. Mass-produced iconic azulejo tiles for speed, replaced filthy alleys with wide, straight boulevards for light, air and movement. At the heart, Praia do Comércio, built exactly over the lost palace. Naming it Commerce Square declared, Portugal is now modern and mercantile, not just religious. The Triumphal Arch and Rua Augusta formed a sea-to-city gateway. Centerpiece, bronze statue of the king on horseback trampling serpents, order conquering chaos. Today, one of Europe's most beautiful plazas. When you stand there, you walk on royal ruins, tsunami scars, and a city that refused to perish. Lisbon's saga is one of extremes. Rose as queen of the seas, fell in one morning of fire, water, and earth, reborn smarter and stronger. The 1700s began in golden splendor and ended in elegant Pombaline reason. Behind today's fades and tourist crowds, the 18th century spirit endures. In the deep Portuguese saudade, the longing for lost beauty. In Alfama's resilient stones. In Carmo's defiant open arches. Lisbon looked apocalypse in the face and chose to live on. It teaches us that even after the greatest tragedies, beauty, strength and hope can be rebuilt, more rational, more enduring, more magnificent than before. If this deep dive into Lisbon's radiant rise, tragic fall and triumphant rebirth gripped you, drop a comment. Which city should we bring back next with AI magic? Edo period Japan? Ancient Rome's marble halls? Thanks for joining. I'm Tim. Together we'll keep resurrecting history. See you in the next era. But the story of Lisbon does not end in flames and rubble. From the smouldering ruins, a new city emerged, not just rebuilt, but reinvented with bold vision and unyielding determination. The Marquis de Pombal, the iron-willed prime minister who stepped into the chaos, saw catastrophe as the ultimate blank canvas. He declared that the old Lisbon, with its crooked medieval alleys, feudal privileges and religious dominance, would die forever. In its place would rise a rational, enlightened metropolis designed for the future. Pombal moved with ruthless efficiency. He quarantined the city to halt disease from the dead, organized mass burials, and fed survivors with emergency grain shipments. Then came the radical redesign. He demolished what remained of the Baixa district, the low-lying commercial heart, ignoring centuries-old property claims by nobles and the church. In their stead, he imposed a revolutionary grid layout, straight, wide streets intersecting at right angles, broad plazas for light and air, and buildings engineered against future tremors. At the core of this innovation stood the Gaiola Pombalina, the Pombaline cage. Every new structure incorporated a hidden wooden lattice of flexible beams and cross braces inside the walls. This frame would bend and sway during quakes instead of cracking like rigid stone. To prove it worked, Pombal staged dramatic tests. Soldiers marched in formation around scale models, stomping to mimic seismic shocks, while observers watched the tiny buildings flex but stand firm. No one had attempted systematic earthquake-resistant architecture on this scale before. Lisbon became the world's first seismic-proof capital. Pombal standardized everything. He mandated uniform building heights, identical window proportions, and mass-produced azulejo tiles, those iconic blue and white ceramic panels, to speed construction and add fire resistance. The new Baixa Pombalina rose block by block, Rua Augusta as the grand spine leading from the river to the Rocio, flanked by arcaded sidewalks for shade and commerce. The Praia do Comércio opened as a vast open square facing the Tagus, framed by symmetrical government buildings and crowned by the triumphal arch. No church dominated this space. Instead, a statue of Jos I on horseback trampled serpents, symbolizing chaos subdued by enlightened order. The reforms went beyond bricks. Pombal expelled the Jesuits in 1759, accusing them of conspiracy and seizing their wealth for Reconstruction. He reformed education, founding secular schools and promoting practical sciences over theology. Censorship eased slightly. New ideas from France and England trickled in more freely. Lisbon shed its medieval skin and donned the clean lines of reason. Yet the transformation was not without pain. Thousands of displaced residents grumbled about lost homes and rigid new rules. Traditionalists mourned the end of the old sacred order. The king, still terrified, never returned to stone walls. He ruled from his tent palace in Ajuda until his death. But Pombal's vision prevailed. By the 1780s, the rebuilt Baixa bustled with merchants, artisans and coffee houses, where Enlightenment ideas were debated over Brazilian coffee and imported books. The new Lisbon reflected a profound shift. The city that once bowed to divine will now celebrated human ingenuity. The earthquake had not only toppled buildings, it had toppled unquestioned faith. Voltaire's mocking poem on the disaster, Rousseau's letters, Kant's early philosophical essays, all traced their urgency back to that All Saints' morning. Lisbon's tragedy accelerated the age of reason across Europe, proving that nature's fury could be met with science, not just prayer. Today, when you walk the Baiche's orderly streets, feel the even pavement underfoot, or gaze up at the harmonious facades, you tread on history's greatest comeback. The wide avenues once designed for troops now carry trams and tourists. The Praia do Comércio, once the site of royal devastation and tidal horror, hosts open-air concerts and sunset views across the Tagus. The Carmo ruins remain roofless, a silent reminder. And in the quiet moments, amid the azulejos and the fado drifting from hidden bars, you sense the enduring Portuguese spirit, saudade mixed with defiance. Lisbon teaches a timeless lesson. The greatest disasters can forge the strongest foundations. From the ashes of empire and faith rose a city of light, logic, and resilience, one that still stands as a beacon of what humanity can achieve when it refuses to surrender. If this chapter on Lisbon's triumphant rebirth stirred something in you, drop a comment. Shall we continue the journey, perhaps into the 19th century revival, or leap to another lost world? Edo, Japan, Imperial Constantinople. Keep resurrecting the past. Until the next chapter, stay curious.